Macbeth.
Act 1. The Prophecy and Temptation. The play opens on a desolate heath in Scotland, shrouded in mist. Three witches, also known as the Weird Sisters, gather amid thunder and lightning. They speak in cryptic tones, discussing their next meeting, which they plan to hold after a great battle is won. They intend to meet Macbeth, a Scottish general who has been fighting for King Duncan against the traitorous MacDonald and the invading forces of Norway. The witches then vanish into the fog, leaving an air of mystery. Meanwhile, King Duncan receives news of the battle from a wounded sergeant. The sergeant describes Macbeth's bravery in battle, how he fought valiantly and killed MacDonald by slicing him from navel to jaw. Duncan is pleased and orders the execution of the Thane of Cawdor, who has been found guilty of treason, and decides to bestow the title upon Macbeth as a reward for his loyalty and courage. As Macbeth and his close friend Banquo return from the battlefield, they come across the three witches on the heath. The witches greet Macbeth with three titles: Thane of Glamis, which he already holds, Thane of Cawdor, and King hereafter. Confused and intrigued, Macbeth presses them for more information, but they turn their attention to Banquo. They tell him that he will be lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy, yet much happier, and that he will father a line of kings, though he will never be king himself. Before Macbeth and Banquo can ask any further questions, the witches vanish into thin air. Shortly after, Ross and Angus, two noblemen, arrive with news from King Duncan. They inform Macbeth that he has been named Thane of Cawdor, fulfilling the first part of the witch's prophecy. Macbeth is astonished and begins to entertain thoughts of the other prophecies coming true, particularly the one about becoming king. Banquo, however, warns him that the witches might be instruments of darkness, luring them with half-truths to betray them in the end. Macbeth's thoughts grow darker as he contemplates the possibility of becoming king, but he hesitates, knowing that this would require the murder of Duncan. When they arrive at Duncan's camp, the king expresses his gratitude to Macbeth and Banquo for their valour in battle. He announces that his son Malcolm will be named Prince of Cumberland, making him heir to the throne. This news unsettles Macbeth, who sees Malcolm as another obstacle in his path to the crown. He begins to harbour thoughts of treachery, but resolves to wait and see what fate has in store. At Inverness, Macbeth's castle, Lady Macbeth receives a letter from her husband detailing the witch's prophecies. She is immediately consumed by ambition and resolves to push Macbeth into seizing the throne. When she learns that King Duncan will be staying at their castle that very night, she sees it as the perfect opportunity to murder him and take the crown. However, she fears that Macbeth is too full of the milk of human kindness to carry out such a deed, so she decides to take matters into her own hands. When Macbeth arrives home, Lady Macbeth urges him to act on the witch's prophecy and kill Duncan while he sleeps. Macbeth is torn between his ambition and his sense of loyalty and honour. He knows that murdering Duncan, who is both his king and his guest, would be a grievous sin. But Lady Macbeth mocks his hesitation, questioning his manhood and calling him a coward. She tells him to screw his courage to the sticking place and assures him that they will not fail if they are bold and resolute. Overwhelmed by his wife's determination and his own ambition, Macbeth agrees to go through with the murder. Lady Macbeth devises a plan. She will get Duncan's guards drunk so they pass out, and then Macbeth can slip into the king's chamber and kill him. They will smear the blood on the guards to frame them for the murder. Macbeth, though still deeply conflicted, resolves to carry out the plan. Act 2. The Murder of Duncan. As night falls, Macbeth is haunted by visions and doubts. He imagines seeing a dagger floating before him, leading him to Duncan's chamber. The vision is so vivid that he is unsure whether it is real or just a figment of his guilty imagination. He tries to shake off his fears, convincing himself that the dagger is only a hallucination brought on by his anxious state of mind. Nevertheless, he takes it as a sign that he must proceed with the murder. While Macbeth prepares to commit the dreadful deed, Lady Macbeth waits anxiously, having drugged the guards and laid out the daggers for her husband. She is nervous but resolute, worried that Macbeth might fail or lose his nerve at the last moment. However, when she hears the owls screech and the crickets cry, she knows that Macbeth has done the deed. Macbeth returns to his wife, his hands covered in blood and in a state of shock. He is horrified by what he has done and is unable to say Amen when he overheard Duncan's guards praying. He also thought he heard a voice cry out, "Sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep," as if his conscience is condemning him to a life of insomnia and torment. Lady Macbeth scolds him for his weakness and takes the bloody daggers from him, smearing them on the guards herself to make it appear as though they committed the murder. She then urges Macbeth to wash the blood from his hands, dismissing his fears by saying that a little water clears us of this deed. As dawn approaches, Lennox, a Scottish nobleman, arrives at Inverness with Macduff, a loyal thane, to greet the king. They discover Duncan's lifeless body, and the castle is thrown into chaos. Macbeth pretends to be shocked and outraged, and in a supposed fit of anger, he kills the king's guards, claiming he did so out of righteous fury. However, this action raises suspicion, particularly in the minds of Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, who fear they might be next. Realizing they are in grave danger, Malcolm and Donalbain decide to flee. Malcolm goes to England, and Donalbain to Ireland, hoping to find safety and support. Their sudden departure makes them appear guilty, and suspicion falls on them as the masterminds behind their father's murder. With Duncan's sons out of the way, Macbeth is crowned king. However, despite achieving his ambition, Macbeth is not at peace. The seeds of paranoia begin to take root in his mind, and he becomes increasingly obsessed with securing his power. Act 3. The descent into paranoia. Now king, Macbeth begins to feel the weight of his crimes. He is troubled by the witch's prophecy that Banquo's descendants will inherit the throne. Although he is king, he fears that Banquo and his son Fleance pose a threat to his power. To prevent the prophecy from coming true, Macbeth decides to have Banquo and Fleance killed. He arranges for 2 murderers, and later a third one, to ambush Banquo and Fleance on their way to a royal banquet. That evening, as Banquo and Fleance are walking through the woods, the murderers attack them. Banquo fights bravely, but is killed, urging Fleance to flee and avenge his death. Fleance escapes, leaving Macbeth's plan incomplete. This failure intensifies Macbeth's paranoia and fear, as he realizes that the witch's prophecy regarding Banquo's descendants might still come true. At the banquet that night, Macbeth tries to present himself as a gracious and confident king, but his composure is shattered when he sees Banquo's ghost sitting at the table. The ghost, invisible to everyone else, stares accusingly at Macbeth, causing him to react with horror and guilt. He starts speaking to the ghost, which frightens and confuses his guests, who cannot see what he is seeing. Lady Macbeth tries to cover for him, dismissing his behaviour as a momentary fit, but the damage is done. Macbeth's erratic behaviour raises further suspicion among the lords, and they begin to doubt his fitness to rule. After the banquet, Macbeth's fear and paranoia deepen. He decides to seek out the witches again, desperate for more information about his future. He is determined to eliminate any threats to his power, no matter the cost. Act 4. The Tyrant's Desperation. Macbeth visits the witches in a dark and cavernous place, demanding answers. The witches conjure up a series of apparitions to deliver new prophecies. The first apparition, an armed head, warns Macbeth to beware Macduff. The second apparition, a bloody child, tells him that none of woman born shall harm Macbeth, which makes Macbeth feel invincible, as every man is born of a woman. The third apparition, a child crowned and holding a tree, declares that Macbeth will not be vanquished until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane Hill. Macbeth takes comfort in these seemingly impossible predictions, but remains wary of Macduff. He decides to eliminate Macduff as a precaution, despite the apparition's assurances. When he learns that Macduff has fled to England to join forces with Malcolm, Macbeth orders the murder of Macduff's family as an act of vengeance and to send a message to his enemies. In England, Malcolm and Macduff are gathering an army to challenge Macbeth's tyranny. When Macduff receives news of the brutal slaughter of his wife and children, he is devastated, but swears to take revenge on Macbeth. Meanwhile, Lady Macbeth, who once seemed so unshakable, is now crumbling under the weight of her guilt. She begins sleepwalking, haunted by the blood on her hands that she can never seem to wash away. In her delirium, she relives the night of Duncan's murder, constantly trying to cleanse herself of the imaginary bloodstains. Her mental state deteriorates rapidly, and she becomes a shadow of her former self. Act 5. The Fall of Macbeth. The final act takes place at Macbeth's castle in Dunsinane. As Malcolm's forces approach, they cut down branches from Birnam Wood to use as camouflage, fulfilling the prophecy that Birnam Wood would come to Dunsinane. Macbeth, now isolated and tormented by his conscience, prepares for battle. Despite the witch's assurances, he is beginning to sense that his end is near. In the castle, Lady Macbeth dies, possibly by suicide, driven mad by guilt and despair. When Macbeth hears of her death, he reacts with a numb indifference, expressing a sense of hopelessness and futility in one of his most famous soliloquies. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, creeps in this petty pace from day to day. He reflects on the meaningless of life, describing it as a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. As the battle rages outside, Macbeth remains defiant, clinging to the witch's prophecy that no man born of a woman can harm him. He meets Macduff on the battlefield, and they engage in a fierce fight. Macbeth is confident that he is invincible, but Macduff reveals that he was born by caesarean section, and therefore not of woman born. Realizing that he has been misled by the witches, Macbeth understands that his fate is sealed. Despite knowing he is doomed, Macbeth refuses to surrender and continues to fight until Macduff kills him. With Macbeth's death, the tyrant's reign comes to an end. Malcolm is proclaimed king, and order is restored to Scotland. The play concludes with a sense of justice, as the rightful heir ascends to the throne. However, the tragic consequences of unchecked ambition, power, and guilt are left to resonate, reminding the audience of the moral lessons at the heart of the story.